Do you know something about the topic that's interesting and unique? Then you are an expert in that version of the topic. I'm not an expert on podcasts, but I have done my research and I'm working it through as I go. I'm going to become an expert because I'm going to start, and you have to start somewhere. Likewise with books, I was not an expert, had no idea what I was doing, and ran into a lot of challenges to do it. Now I can safely say that as far as publishing on Amazon and print, and specifically print books, which are more complicated to create, I can say pretty safely that I'm an expert in how to do it. Hey, this is KB. I'm a technologist, thought leader, and self-published author. I've been publishing ebooks, print books, audio, video, and other content online since 2015. I stumbled quite a bit, tried many different types of content, marketing strategies, software tools, and social media streams. Now I'm here to help you learn from my mistakes and find inspiration along the way. We'll take a journey together to leverage your content, dive into practical tips, and test out actionable strategies that move you from posts to profit. This is the Self-Pub-Empire podcast. So today I'd like to introduce the Self-Pub-Empire podcast. This podcast is based on my experience with self-publishing online for quite a few years, as a matter of fact, really about since 2015, 2016. And I created a company called Self-Pub-Empire. And I'm going to talk about that later on, I think in later podcasts, talk about the business of it, the business piece of it. I don't really think a lot of people talk about that, but I'll definitely get back to that in the future. But I'm really, really excited to share this with you, start this podcast. I hope to have this podcast run for a very, very long time, and a little bit about what I've been doing with online creating. And again, it implies self-pub empire, implies that you have a online publishing empire of some kind that you've self-published. In this day and age, it's amazing that we can even do these kinds of things, because the internet has an enormous amount of power and is a great creative outlet. So welcome to the show. I'm KB. A lot of people do call me that, believe it or not. You can find my books online, done quite a few different things, but you can check those in the show notes. We'll get to that later. But I love the creative process. I love talking about the creative process. I love business and experimenting with various marketing plans and things online and trying different things out. I really love it. I also run it as a real business, as to the best of my ability. And that's really where I started. I created this book, really a technical book. You can find it on Amazon. And it is, boy, it's been out there for quite a while, and ran into a bunch of things. And whenever I talk to people about it and talk about what are the things that I've done with it and the book itself, I find it funny. They keep saying, well, I would really like to do that too. I can't believe that you do that. That's really amazing. I would love to do the same thing. And how did you do that? And so on and so forth. So ran into a ton of different problems and ton of different challenges with it, because it is tricky. It can be a little tricky. There's a lot of information out there. I like to try to boil things down to really basic kinds of things and work through it from that perspective, focusing on those things. Get fancy, do simple, start simple, get fancy later on. So if you like those kinds of things, you like business, you like marketing, you like the creative process, you enjoy that, hey, keep listening. I think I might have something for you here, and hopefully able to inspire you a little bit as well, because I did this in my spare time. That's what I did with the book. It takes some self-control, takes some discipline to get it done, but you can do it. So I really much enjoy this. Anyway, so this is for anybody who wants to be a creator, who loves to create, wants to do something online. There's a bunch of things that you can create. It is amazing. Self-published authors, this is where I grew up. This is where I started. And I like print books. I like ebooks as well. I really have tried a wide variety of types of books online in print. There's caveats to each kind. And when I say each kind, I say that from the perspective of print, but fiction and nonfiction, original work kind of pieces are very similar. Nonfiction is probably a little harder in some ways because it is more technical in nature. Formatting is very important. A lot harder to translate that into an ebook or a Kindle book, but those are kind of similar. But also did some other things too, like a workbook, really an activity book, which requires a lot of work as far as the format and layout and things like that. Tried a summary book and published that in Amazon. Amazon's very particular about how you do that. Likewise, published a couple of coloring books, the grown-up coloring books for fighting anxiety and things like that. Did those as well. Those are also a little tricky to do on Amazon because there's requirements and things like that. Same thing with YouTube. There's requirements, and the bar is pretty high these days with YouTube as far as quality of that. Audiobooks, going back to the first thing for self-publishing, the summary books in particular, I record audio as well. And really that's another jumping point from recording the audiobooks on ACX, which is the back end to the Audible platform on Amazon. And there's other publishing. We'll talk about those later. But really the going from that to this podcast actually wasn't much different. I have all the equipment to do an audiobook. And so really a podcast is using all the same equipment. Ebooks, similarly, those are out there as well. Ebooks, of course, being Kindle, things like that. I start with print and very much go to Kindle from there. Online education has exploded. Those are out there as well. People like to do that. If you have something that you think you can teach, I'm using the podcast to teach. I hope, hopefully I'll be able to teach something from this. There are Etsy stores out there, creators using those for all kinds of physical and electronic products that are created by themselves. I've done that too. And product making, of course, all kinds of things. Consultants, a lot of consultants like to write a book or have a book or create a book and get it published to show their expertise. That's kind of a strategy that's been out there for a while online. You can see that. People talk about that quite a bit. And the list is really quite large about online creators. You could talk about Instagram creators. You can talk about YouTube, TikTok. Like I said, YouTube is out there. A lot of things are going towards that. The reel, the Facebook reel, the Instagram reel, the very short content kind of thing because they're easily consumable. I like the podcast because people like to listen to podcasts in the car, much like a radio. But who listens to the radio anymore? Not as much as they used to. But podcasting has definitely exploded, and I like that as a medium as well. But the list of being a creator or what you can do with it goes on and on and on. And so we have some things in common. All creators that are online creators have some things in common. Even product making, even something where you're physically selling something, that there's a lot of things that we have in common because of the way the internet is set up. So the creators and posters on social media, we really have a number of things in common, especially if you're here listening to this podcast. And it's really three things that I boiled it down to. I know there's a lot more, but number one, you love to create. And if you love to create, that's a really great place to start. That's where I started. I love to create. I love to make things, and I love to write and certainly teach. And again, my book to start off with was about teaching. It's about teaching seniors how to use smartphones. And when it came out, smartphones were newish, not new, but newer, and had run it. And there's a story I could tell later on. But really, I had heard from different elderly folks that have gotten them to say, "Hey, there's no manual that comes with this device. Now, what am I supposed to do? I don't know what to do with it." And most of them now, of course, have a lot more tutorial-like features to start off with. But there's still some things there, and there's some parts of the market there that I'm still thinking about attacking for seniors and elderly. There's a lot of power with a smartphone that helps enhance their lives. But I love to create. I love to teach. I love to do those things. And you probably do too. And if you do, that's a great place to start. If you're doing it, you have to do it with some self-discipline. And that means creating with a little bit of a purpose. And I think that's important for number one, you love to creating with purpose. The second thing, you want your creations out there in the world. You want them to have reach. If you create and paint a beautiful painting and keep it to yourself and no one actually looks at it, that's great. It's for you and it's your private creation. That's great. But most creators online want to have reach. And I use the word reach. I think it's a fairly common word in social media. And that's how far is this really going to go? How many people have seen it? In advertising, it's called impressions. That is one of those things. We'll talk about advertising as well. And free advertising really through social media. It's the same thing, except you're not really paying for it. But your reach is really important. And of course, those things end up sometimes going viral, which is great. That's what everybody hopes for, is a viral post that reaches an enormous amount of people. So you want your creations to have reach. Number 3, you really like vanity metrics. I know I do. How many likes? Those are so vanity metrics are likes and things like that, likes and impressions and those things. But what you really want to do is go from posts to profit. If you're a creator that really wants something out there in the world and you want something from it, you want to make a profit from it. You want something to come of it that encourages you to do it more. What do most of the creators that I've talked to, and I'm going to talk to some, I think we're going to see if we can get some interviews with folks, creators I know a bunch. What do they really want? They want to do it full time. Many online creators do it part-time. They don't have it as a full-time supporting their families, being able to support their families with their creations. It's unfortunate, but it's the truth. And so creating something good, creating something that people want, and making profit from it, and figuring out how to get from one to the other, and posting it, but then getting a profit from it, that's posts to profit. And most of us do this online stream. I'm going to talk about that a little bit. What I call it, and there's a lot of information about what to do with those things, but it's hard to pay attention to that and really understand what you're doing unless you're really focused on it. And that's where that business, you're crossing the threshold from just being a creator to being a creator with a business. That's where you're crossing that threshold. So for this podcast, what's your return on your time here? One of the things I like to think about from a business perspective. Definitely love to talk about business and numbers. From a business perspective, that's ROI, return on investment, or ROT, return on time. Really, what is a podcast? It's generally free. You have the equipment to listen to it, but you would have the smartphone and your earbuds anyway. So what is your return on time here? So the numbers from a business perspective, you could consider this a business coaching opportunity or an online creator coaching opportunity. And a business coach can be really expensive. And online classes can get pricey when you really start talking about details of certain things. However, this podcast is much more business coach-like because it's just audio. So a business coach, the national average seemed to be about $250 to $350 per hour. That's really the average rate that I've seen that the internet has provided to me doing some very basic research. I'm sure it varies quite a bit. I'm sure there's a lot of different ways that companies participate or I shouldn't say participate. They make package deals and things like that. But generally speaking, $250 to $350 per hour. That's quite a bit. We're seeing a lot of business coaching out there. And I've even seen some that have run into the thousands of dollars per month, which is more than 10 hours of time for just business coaching like that. But I've seen some pretty pricey business coaching for 1 or 2 sessions per month with an expert. So for this, we're looking at about 30 minutes of podcast time. That's about an average, what most podcasts really go for. And 30 minutes of compact information with online supporting materials. So I have a website, I have show notes that I'm going to add for this when I post this. And you'll be able to go there, see the links, check out the tools that I'm actually enjoying using myself. I don't usually like to talk about things that I don't use and talk them up and say, hey, you got to go try this if I don't use it myself. So there's things on there that I'm using myself that I'll talk about in the future as well. And you can check out as well. And so I've got some online supporting materials. Hopefully I'll have more and more materials as time goes on for you to download some kit-like things, some step-by-step pieces to fill in, or workbook type material to say, hey, what are my steps to get to what Kevin's really talking about? Also, you would probably would invest then, therefore, about an hour per episode. So that's about a $250 value, really for free. That's return on time. And it's important to think about that because you can also trade money for time as well. So you can trade time for money and you can trade money for time. Doing which one at the right time is an important distinction, particularly for things that are tedious tasks. That's where you're going to want to put money into trading cash for time versus this, which is learning and education is always a great investment. I prefer that. I like that. I also have spent a lot of time educating myself. I actually do have a master's degree in computer science, and I also program artificial intelligence for fun, things like that. And so if you invest in about an hour, maybe a little bit less per episode, looking at notes and listening in, that's at least a $250 value, really for free. And I think that's a good return on investment for folks. And I'm enjoying it myself. So what's my return on investment? I'm having fun. I'm enjoying this. I like to help people. And I think this is a great way to do it. So that's my return on this is to help everybody out there with running into the same things that I did and helping you through that. And that's really the name of the game. That's the part that I really like. That's the creative part that I enjoy. So when I say posts to profit, what do I really mean by that? So everything got turned on its head when we started to hit this social media extravaganza, explosion, and being able to really just shout at people who are online. You're not shouting at people. You're sending out messages out to really the universe of people that are online. And there's algorithms in each of the social media platforms to bring those pieces of content to you if you're not subscribed to the content, right? So I think everyone can agree that that's kind of how it works. And every platform is a little different with how it does that. TikTok it uses less of a social graph and uses more of an interest graph. I think Instagram's moving a little more towards interest graphing as well. And I can talk about those later. But Facebook is very social graphing, but also some interest. So then they started the news stream. So they really came up with that first. Those are the ones I like to talk about the most. Snapchat's out there too. That's a very interesting place to look also. But you put this content out there, even a website for that matter, you put that content out there and you don't know how many people are going to see it. Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it. Same thing. Put that content out there. You don't know how many people are actually going to see this, but you're doing it basically for free. You already have a smartphone, for example, and you just post it and it's free to you. So it's kind of like saying I'm advertising for free. The tricky part is it's not focused. It's shotgun approach. It's a scatter approach, and you can actually get something to go viral and really have that become your advertising platform is something that came viral. And it has happened. It does happen to people. And when it does happen, then their content is viewed by many, many, many people, and they have reach, right? But to get there requires usually some posts versus traditional advertising. And I mean posts in like a steady stream of those. Traditional advertising, you're paying and you're saying, please put this in front of somebody. And that's also on the social media platforms as well as search and Google and so on and so forth. So those things are out there too. It's the same idea. When I say post to profit, though, I'm really talking about not using advertising, the paid advertising. I'm saying creating a content value stream is what I would like to call it, where you're providing value on a regular basis to get that your creations in front of people and showing them this is what I have and this is what you're going to get from it. But what's the value? For some people, it's learning, it's investment, it's education. Some people it's entertainment, or it solves a problem for them. Those are all very great ways to say, hey, this is valuable to you. But this content value stream is very important because that's how you build up a following and you reach a certain critical mass, depending on your pretending whatever it is that you're creating, whatever people are interested in. And there's all kinds of different things. Some people like specific horror movie types and things like that, those kinds of things. So for posting things and talking about different ways to go with that, podcasts are really one of them as well. So you can tell what I'm doing to help you is to say that I'm creating a content value stream by creating a podcast. I don't mind posting things on Instagram in my feeds, things like that. I haven't done a very good job of it at this point in time. I'm going to get better and I'm going to try more things with it as well. And we're going to take that journey together. But Dystopia, for example, shows that they did a survey. most podcasters really quit after their first 3 episodes. They just fail. They just stop. And I think it's a wide variety of reasons. Interest, keeping up the ideas and thoughts, and so on and so forth. And you can see that I'll have the link in the show notes, dystopia.com/y-podcast-fail. And you can read that article for yourself. It is a brief read. It's very interesting. But I had originally thought it was 10 episodes, but apparently that is not the right number. It's 3 episodes, and then they fail. If you think about it from taking podcasts as a content value stream, and you think about it versus an online post, most people would say, well, wait a minute. I post, way more than 3 episodes or 3 things on those streams. But the big difference is those feeds, those social media feeds, can be very brief. They're very, very short topic kinds of platforms. That's really what they are. And short form information. YouTube is longer form information, and podcasts are longer form information. And I think YouTubers end up probably quitting after a few episodes as well. And so I think that those two things are kind of similar in the format because of the timing. And the social media, on the other hand, is very short form. So it's easy to post. But if you think about it, what are you actually doing? You're posting on a platform where everybody's posting. Lots of people are posting. Maybe not in your specific creation area, your niche, whatever it is that you've got, but they still are. And so consistency then becomes very critical. So you love to create. You want your creations to have reach, and you really like the vanity metrics, but you really want to go from post to profit. Consistency is going to be critical. Likewise, versus this, again, information in the podcast, I think it's very interesting. It's a good example. Podcasters fail. They quit after the first 3 episodes, and therefore there's no traction. They don't have any consistency. You can't count on them. I've also read, and I can't remember from where, that 2 or 3 podcasts per week is really important. Those are like the right numbers, that people like those. And of course, all kinds of topics, right? So consistency is critical. Having a cadence is critical. You can be careful and planful about what you produce in relation to what you're creating. And again, for me, using myself as the example here, I like the podcast because I can talk about all these things, including audiobooks, which again is very similar because I have all the hardware. I can talk about what hardware I use and how I use it. And do you like how it sounds? And what tools do I use to edit and so on and so forth and make it so that I can post and et cetera, and all those things. I like that. And I like that from the podcast. So if you have it in relation to what you're creating, that will make a really big impact in being consistent with what that is. And really, here we are. We're advertising for free, right? But it's kind of shouting into the crowd, and you never know for sure what you're gonna get from them. I do want to make a side comment about some people feeling like, well, I don't really have anything to say. I'm not an expert, and what am I going to do? You can get rid of the idea that you have to be an expert, because there's actually no definition of that. Do you know something about the topic that's interesting and unique? Then you are an expert in that version of the topic. I'm not an expert on podcasts, but I have done my research and I'm working it through as I go. I'm going to become an expert because I'm going to start, and you have to start somewhere. Likewise with books, I was not an expert, had no idea what I was doing, and ran into a lot of challenges to do it. Now I can safely say that as far as publishing on Amazon and print, and specifically print books, which are more complicated to create, I can say pretty safely that I'm an expert in how to do it. I'm not an expert at selling books. But again, my niche isn't very big, so I don't really have that large of a following for that kind of a thing because of the demographics of the books that I was creating. Either way, you can be planful in relation to what it is you're creating. And we have this amazing platforms, all these free platforms to put these things on. But if you're planful, you can make a much bigger impact. So you love to create. You want your creations to have some reach. And vanity metrics are great. That's awesome. But how do we get from posts to profit? That's what we're going to talk about in this Self-Pub Empire podcast. It's going to be a wild ride. I'm going to do this for as long as I have a voice and keep going as far as I can to help you. Thanks for listening. And I'm going to dive into more of these topics as we go on this journey. And frankly, I'm excited about this because as I was talking, I ended up with more ideas for more things to talk about on this podcast in the next episode. So let's keep going and get from posts to profit. Hey, congratulations. You just listened to another episode of the Self-Pub Empire podcast. I really hope you found something inspiring, useful, and actionable for your own entrepreneurial and business aspirations. Let's keep connecting as solopreneurs, authors, and online creators of all kinds. For more information, how-tos, great tools, and show notes for the show, head over to selfpubempire.com/podcast. Until next time, let's continue moving from posts to profit.